Before 1970, an American man could read a cartridge head stamp the way he read his own name. He knew which round dropped a whitetail in the cedars and which one his father carried up the mountain for elk. Then the magnums came, the catalog shrank, and the old numbers faded from the gun counter. These 20 cartridges once ruled deer camps from Maine to Oregon. Number 4 was the deer rifle your grandfather swore by, and number 1 went to war before it ever went hunting. Let's count them down. Number 20, the 25-20 Winchester. In 1893, Winchester chambered a little bottlenecked round for the slim model 1892 carbine, and for the next 40 years it lived in the hands of farm boys, trappers, and men who fed a family on squirrel and rabbit. The 25-20 pushed an 86-grain bullet at a modest clip, quiet enough not to spook the henhouse, cheap enough that a box of cartridges cost pocket change at the general store. A boy learned to shoot with one, resting the forearm on a fence rail, dropping cottontails in the frost of a November morning. It was accurate, gentle on the shoulder, and merciful on small game that a heavier round would have torn apart. Then the .22 rimfire got better and cheaper, and the .222 Remington arrived in 1950 with flatter aim and a scope-friendly bolt action. The little 25-20 slipped off the shelves. Today it survives in the memories of men who remember a grandfather's saddle gun hanging above the barn door, and the crack of a small rifle carrying clean across a cold field. Number 19, the .32-20 Winchester. Introduced in 1882 for the legendary Model 1873, the .32-20 did something few cartridges ever managed. It lived in both the rifle and the revolver, so a man could carry one box of ammunition for the gun on his hip and the gun in his saddle scabbard. Cowboys loved that. Farmers loved that a single purchase armed the whole homestead against varmints, coyotes, and the occasional small deer taken close in the timber. The .32-20 was a working man's round, unglamorous and endlessly practical, and for half a century it was one of the best-selling cartridges in America. But the same versatility that made it beloved also made it a compromise. It was never quite enough for deer and always a touch much for rabbits. As dedicated small-game rimfires and modern deer cartridges divided its territory between them, the .32-20 lost its reason to exist. By the 1960s, it was already a curiosity. It is remembered now as the round of the open range, the cartridge that rode in 1,000 movies before anyone knew it was disappearing. Number 18, the .38-40 Winchester. Here is a cartridge with a LIE built right into its name. The .38-40, introduced in the 1870s for the Winchester lever guns, was not a .38 at all. It fired a bullet measuring right around 41/100ths of an inch, and old-timers who knew the trick just smiled when a greenhorn asked for 38 bullets to reload it. Like its stablemates, it served double duty in rifle and six-gun, and it hit noticeably harder than the .32-20, making it a genuine choice for deer at short range and heavy brush. Lawmen carried it, ranchers trusted it. For decades, the general store kept the yellow and red boxes stacked beside the .44-40, and the .38 Winchester center fire crowd never gave it a second thought. But the .38-40 was a black powder era design straining against a smokeless future, and when self-contained bolt-action deer rifles arrived, its slow, arcing bullet looked antique. It faded quietly. Reloaders kept it alive longest, drawn to its odd caliber and its cowboy pedigree, but for the ordinary hunter, it vanished. The .38 that wasn't a .38 became a footnote nobody could quite explain. Number 17, the .219 Zipper. In 1937, Winchester tried to build the perfect varmint round for a lever gun, and they called it the Zipper because that is exactly how it sounded going down range. Chambered in the Model 64, it drove a light .224 bullet past 3,000 feet per second, flat and fast, the kind of speed that flattened a woodchuck across a distant hayfield or reached out for a coyote on the ridge. Farmers who wanted to protect crops and stock without switching to a bolt gun finally had a lever action that shot like a rifle from a catalog dream. For a few seasons, it was the talk of the varmint pages, but the lever action fought against everything the Zipper wanted to be. The tube magazine demanded blunt bullets, the action shed accuracy under a scope, and a proper varmint hunter wanted a stiff, single-shot or bolt platform for the fine aiming that long-range shooting required. The bolt gun cartridges simply did it better. Production dwindled fast, and by the 1960s, the zipper was gone from most shelves. It is remembered as a bright, brief idea, a cartridge that zipped into the catalogs and zipped right back out. Number 16, the .22 Savage High Power. In 1912, a brilliant and restless designer named Charles Newton handed Savage a cartridge that promised to change hunting forever. The .22 Savage High Power spat a 70-grain bullet near 2,800 feet per second out of the graceful Savage Model 99, and the advertising made claims that raised eyebrows even then. This little screamer, they said, could take the deer, and some bold souls insisted it would handle animals far larger. For a while, hunters believed it. The velocity was intoxicating in an age when most deer rounds lobbed heavy slugs at leisurely speeds, and the flat trajectory felt like witchcraft. It found a devoted following, and across the Atlantic it lived a long second life as a European chambering. But at home, the truth caught up. The bullets of the day sometimes failed on big-boned game, and larger .25 and .30 caliber rounds proved more honest killers. The high power's reputation cooled. By mid-century, it was a specialist oddity in the States, yet every fast-stepping small bore that followed owed something to Newton's audacity, to the day a .22 dared to hunt deer. Number 15, the .25-35 Winchester. When smokeless powder arrived in the 1890s, it changed everything. And in 1895, Winchester introduced the .25-35 as one of the very first small-bore, smokeless sporting cartridges chambered in the new model 1894. To a generation raised on clouds of black powder smoke that hung in the woods and gave away a man's position, the .25-35 was a revelation. It fired a slender 117-grain bullet cleanly and flatly, with almost no smoke and gentle recoil, dropping deer without punishing the shooter's shoulder or ringing his ears. Youngsters and smaller-framed hunters adored it. In the deep timber of the Northeast and the farm country of the Midwest, it built a loyal, quiet following of men who valued precision over brute force. But it was born in the shadow of a giant. That same Model 1894 also chambered the .30-30, and the .30-30 hit harder, sold cheaper, and captured the American imagination completely. The .25-35 was always the overlooked sibling. It lingered into the post-war years and then simply stopped selling. Today it is a connoisseur's cartridge, remembered fondly by the few who know that the smokeless deer rifle really began right here. Number 14, the .40-65 Winchester. Now we step back into the age of black powder and buffalo, into the world of the great Model 1886 lever gun. The .40-65 Winchester, introduced in 1887, threw a heavy 40 caliber lead bullet over a stiff charge of black powder, and it was meant for serious work on serious animals across the open West. It bridged an era. The buffalo herds were already thinning when it appeared, but the .40-65 found employment on elk, on bear, on the tough game of the mountains, and it did so with the deep, rolling authority that only a big, slow slug can deliver. Hunters trusted its bone-breaking mass and its reputation for putting animals down where they stood. Then smokeless powder rewrote the rules. A new generation of cartridges reached farther and shot flatter with a fraction of the recoil and none of the smoke, and the massive black powder rounds suddenly looked like relics. The .40-65 fell out of the catalogs. For decades it was all but dead. Only the modern black powder silhouette shooters resurrected it, and only barely. For the hunter, it belongs to a vanished frontier, to the last days before smoke cleared from the American woods. Number 13, the .38-56 Winchester, another child of the mighty Model 1886. The .38-56 arrived in 1887 as a hard-hitting black powder round built for men who needed to stop large game and stop it decisively. It fired a heavy bullet of roughly 375 caliber, and in the hands of a market hunter or a homesteader defending stock from predators, it was a formidable tool. In the timbered mountains and the northern forests, where shots came close and fast and an animal had to drop before it reached cover, the .38-56 earned its keep. It carried the confidence of mass, That old frontier faith that a big, heavy slug forgives a lot and finishes the job. Ammunition companies stocked it faithfully into the early 20th century, but it was a design tethered to a dying technology, and once smokeless cartridges proved they could do everything it did with far less recoil and far greater reach, the 38-56 had nothing left to offer the ordinary hunter. It slid into obsolescence and then into silence. Collectors prize the old rifles now, but the cartridge itself is a ghost, remembered only in the yellowed pages of catalogs where it once shared the shelf with legends. Number 12. The .33 Winchester. By 1902, Winchester knew the great black powder rounds were finished, so they built a smokeless big game cartridge to keep the beloved Model 1886 relevant. The .33 Winchester drove a 200-grain bullet of .338 caliber with genuine authority, and for a generation of elk hunters and bear hunters in the Mountain West, it was the answer. It hit hard, penetrated deep, and gave the classic lever action a modern punch that could be trusted on animals far larger than deer. Guides carried it. Outfitters recommended it. In the high country of Montana and Wyoming, the .33 Winchester built a reputation as a no-nonsense stopper, and men who owned one rarely felt undergunned. But its life was short. In 1936, Winchester introduced the .348 in a brand new rifle, and the .348 simply outclassed the .33 in every measurable way. Overnight, the older round became redundant, and the company that created it moved on. Production ceased, ammunition dried up, and the .33 Winchester slipped from memory almost completely. It is one of the great forgotten elk cartridges of its day, a round that did everything right and was buried by its own successor. Number 11, the .32-40 Winchester. Some cartridges are remembered for power, but the .32-40 was remembered for precision. Introduced in 1884 and originally a Ballard target round, it became a favorite of the finest riflemen in America, the men who lay behind their sights at the shooting matches and split the difference between winning and losing by a hair. Its reputation for accuracy was legendary, and that reputation followed it into the deer woods. A .32-40 in a good single shot or lever gun would place a bullet exactly where a careful hunter aimed it, and for the man who prized a clean, precise shot over raw energy, nothing else felt quite as trustworthy. It killed deer neatly at moderate range and rarely wasted meat. For decades, it enjoyed the quiet loyalty of thoughtful hunters and target shooters alike, but the world grew impatient with its gentle velocity, and faster, flatter, smokeless rounds made its rainbow trajectory feel dated. The match shooters moved on to modern calibers, and the deer hunters followed. The .32-40 faded, remembered by a devoted few as one of the most accurate cartridges of its age, the choice of men who cared about exactly where the bullet went. Number 10, the .38-55 Winchester. The .32-40's larger companion, the .38-55, appeared the same year, 1884, and it may be the most fondly remembered of all the old black powder deer rounds. It fired a heavy .375 caliber bullet, typically around 255 grains, with the same target grade accuracy that made its family famous, and it earned a devotion that outlasted nearly every cartridge on this list. In the deer woods of the Midwest and the South, generations of hunters carried .38-55 lever guns and single shots, and they trusted the big, slow bullet to anchor a whitetail without destroying it. There was a rhythm to it, a satisfaction in the deep report and the certain knockdown, and men handed these rifles from father to son with quiet ceremony. It was accurate enough for targets and stout enough for game, a rare combination. Yet even the .38-55 could not hold back the smokeless tide forever. The .30-30 and its kin shot flatter and cost less, and slowly the old cartridge lost its place at the counter. Still, of all the vanished rounds, the .38-55 clung to life longest, kept alive by men who simply loved it and refused to let it go. Number 9, the .303 Savage. Do not let the name fool you. The .303 Savage, introduced in 1894 for the sleek and revolutionary Savage Model 99, had nothing to do with the British military round of the same number. This was an all-American deer and moose cartridge, And in the North Woods of New England, in the Great Lakes country, and up across the Canadian border, it became something close to a religion. The Model 99 was a marvel. A hammerless lever gun with a rotary magazine that fed pointed bullets safely, and chambered in .303 Savage. It was the ideal timber rifle, quick to the shoulder, and deadly in the close, brushy woods where most northern deer were killed. It threw a heavy bullet with real authority, and moose hunters swore by it. For half a century, it was one of the most respected woods cartridges in America. But the .300 Savage, from the very same company, eventually eclipsed it, offering more velocity in the same beloved rifle. The .303 Savage faded through the mid-century, its ammunition growing scarce. Men who grew up in deer camps of the Northeast still speak its name with warmth, remembering the rifle their fathers carried into the cedar swamps. Number 8, the .348 Winchester. In 1936, in the depths of the Depression, Winchester did something bold. It built an entirely new rifle, the Model 71, around a powerful new cartridge, and that cartridge was the .348. It was the last great big game round designed for a Winchester lever action, and it went out swinging. Firing heavy bullets up to 250 grains, the .348 delivered thunderous power, enough to drop elk, moose, and big bear with conviction. And the Model 71 that housed it was a beautifully made, smooth cycling rifle that hunters treasured. In the mountains and the deep timber, where a man might face large and occasionally dangerous game at close range, the .348 inspired absolute confidence. It was the choice of guides and serious hunters, a cartridge with a fierce and loyal following. But it was expensive to produce, and it was locked into a single rifle. When the Model 71 was discontinued in the 1950s, the .348 lost its home, and no other major rifle stepped in to carry it. Ammunition grew rare and costly. The last of the great Winchester lever cartridges quietly disappeared, remembered now by devotees who consider the Model 71 and .348 one of the finest hunting rifles America ever built. Number 7, the .405 Winchester. This is the cartridge a president took to Africa. Introduced in 1904 for the Model 1895, the .405 Winchester fired a 300-grain bullet with authority, and when Theodore Roosevelt planned his great 1909 safari, he chose it and famously called it his big medicine for lions. That endorsement alone made the .405 a legend in its own time, and the image of the old Rough Rider standing over African game with a lever gun in his hands burned itself into the American imagination. At home, hunters carried it for elk, moose, and bear, trusting its heavy bullet to penetrate deep and hit hard. It was one of the most powerful lever-action cartridges ever made, and for men who wanted a fast-handling rifle with real stopping power, it delivered. But the box magazine bolt actions were coming, and they handled the new high-pressure Magnum rounds that the flat-shooting Model 1895 never could. The .405 was the peak of an old design at the very moment that design became obsolete. Its ammunition grew scarce, and by mid-century, it was a rarity. Yet it remains the most romantic round on this list, forever tied to a president, a safari, and the phrase big medicine. Number 6, the .35 Remington. In 1906, Remington introduced a family of cartridges for its slick, new Model 8 autoloader, and one of them, the .35 Remington, would outlive all the rest and become a genuine American classic. Before slowly slipping away, it fired a stout 200-grain bullet of .358 caliber, and in the thick brush and close timber where so many whitetails are killed, it was very nearly perfect. The big, blunt bullet plowed through brush, hit with authority, and put deer down decisively at woods ranges, and it did all of this with manageable recoil and handy, lightweight rifles. It rode in the Model 8, then the Model 14 pump, and later found a long home in the Marlin lever guns. For decades, it was the beloved brush cartridge, the round a man reached for when the shots would be close and the cover would be heavy. Deer camps across the east and south ran on it, but the flat-shooting cartridges of the post-war boom stole the spotlight, and hunters chased velocity and reach they rarely needed. The .35 Remington faded from popularity, even as it hung on in production. It is remembered as the quintessential brush gun, the honest, thumping woods cartridge that simply worked. Number 5. The 250-3000 Savage. In 1915, Charles Newton and Savage achieved something that stunned the shooting world. They built the first commercial cartridge to reach 3,000 feet per second, and they named it for that very number, the 250-3000 Savage. To a public raised on lumbering black powder velocities, 3,000 feet per second was almost science fiction, and the round became a sensation. In the graceful Model 99, it shot flat and fast, and it developed a reputation as a superb deer cartridge that killed far out of proportion to its modest recoil. Hunters marveled that a rifle so pleasant to shoot could drop deer so cleanly at ranges that older cartridges could only dream of. It was accurate, efficient, and endlessly likable, and a devoted following grew around it that has never entirely died. But the post-war Magnum craze redefined what hunters thought they wanted, and a flood of new 25 and 24 caliber cartridges crowded it out of the market. The round that broke the 3,000 barrier became a nostalgic favorite rather than a top seller. Among those who know rifles, though, the 250-3000 is spoken of with real affection, honored as a milestone, and cherished as one of the sweetest shooting deer cartridges ever made. Number 4. The 300 Savage. In 1920, Savage set out to do the impossible. Match the mighty 30-06 in a short cartridge that would fit the compact Model 99 action. The result was the 300 Savage, and it came astonishingly close. It drove a 30 caliber bullet with power that approached the great military round, all packed into a stubby, efficient case. And in the beloved Savage lever gun, it gave the American deer and elk hunter a hard-hitting, flat-shooting rifle in a slim, fast-handling package. For a generation, it was one of the most respected big game cartridges in the country, trusted from the whitetail woods of the east to the elk country of the west, and it built a reputation for putting animals down with authority. Hunters loved that it delivered near Magnum performance without a Magnum's bulk or brutal recoil. But the 300 Savage carried the seed of its own eclipse. Its short, efficient design directly inspired the military's experiments that produced the 308 Winchester in 1952, and once the 308 arrived, offering slightly more, in a cartridge that fit modern bolt actions, the 300 Savage was doomed. The child surpassed the parent. It faded from the counters, remembered as the brilliant round that quietly gave America one of its greatest cartridges, and then stepped aside. Number 3. The 32 Winchester Special. No cartridge on this list lived closer to the American heart than the 32 Winchester Special. Introduced around 1901 for the Model 1894, it was designed as a slightly larger companion to the famous 30-30, firing a 170 grain bullet of .321 caliber, and it was built with a slower rifling twist so that a man could reload it at home with black powder if he chose. For countless hunters, that was the whole point. This was the everyman's deer rifle, the gun behind the kitchen door, the one grandfather swore by and taught his sons to shoot. In the deer woods of Pennsylvania, the Midwest, the South, and the North Country, the 32 Special dropped whitetails by the millions, hitting a touch harder than the 30-30 and inspiring fierce, loyal devotion among the men who carried it. Arguments over whether the 32 or the 30-30 was better raged in every deer camp in America. But the 30-30 always outsold it. Ammunition for the Special grew comparatively scarce, and slowly the round drifted toward the margins. It never quite died, but it faded from the mainstream it once ruled. To an entire generation of American men, though, the 32 Winchester Special was simply what a deer rifle was. Number 2, the 35 Winchester. In 1903, Winchester chambered a genuine big game thumper in the flat-shooting Model 1895, and the 35 Winchester became the round that serious hunters carried when the game was large and the country was rough. It fired a heavy 250 grain bullet with real power, and unlike the lever guns with tubular magazines, the box magazine of the Model 1895 let it shoot pointed bullets at higher velocity, reaching farther and hitting harder than the older designs. In Alaska, in the Rockies, on the trail of moose and bear and elk, the 35 Winchester earned a reputation as a dependable stopper, and adventurers and guides packed it into the wildest corners of the continent. It offered a rare combination for its day: big bore authority and a fast modern rifle. But it was a specialist cartridge in a specialist rifle, never as common as the deer rounds. And when the Model 1895 wound down and the great bolt-action magnums rose to dominate big game hunting, the .35 Winchester had nowhere left to go. Its ammunition vanished from the shelves, and the rounds slipped almost entirely from memory. It is remembered now only by students of the old rifles, a powerful, capable cartridge that carried hunters into the last untamed country and was forgotten when that country was tamed. Number 1, the 3040 Krag, and at the very top stands the cartridge that went to war before it ever went hunting. Adopted by the United States Army in 1892 as its first smokeless powder military round, the 3040 Krag, chambered in the Krag Jorgensen rifle, carried American soldiers up San Juan Hill in 1898 and marked the moment the nation stepped out of the black powder age forever. But its second life was even greater than its first. When the Army moved on, thousands of Krag rifles flooded into civilian hands, and the 3040 became a beloved hunting cartridge across the country. Chambered in the Krag, in the Winchester Model 1895, and in the Savage 99, it drove a heavy bullet with plenty of authority for deer, elk, and bear, and it developed a fierce loyalty among hunters who trusted its military pedigree and its proven killing power. For decades, it was a common sight in deer camps and gun cabinets, a cartridge every American man recognized on sight. Then the .30-06 and the flood of newer rounds slowly pushed it aside, and its ammunition grew scarce. The old soldier faded, yet no cartridge on this list carries more history, more weight, more meaning. It fought a war, then it fed a nation, and it deserves to be remembered first. There they are, 20 cartridges that once lived in every American's vocabulary and quietly slipped away. Which one did your father or grandfather carry? Drop the name in the comments, tell us the rifle it lived in, and if you remember these old rounds, hit subscribe. Some of them deserve to be remembered.